When you got the gig at CBS, was that something you applied for through LinkedIn or how'd that go?
CBS? Oh God, that's my gosh, that's 30 years ago. I guess you could say I was recruited as I worked with my boss at Warner Brothers Television,
Okay.
and he left to go to CBS and brought me over.
So it wasn't an application out of the blue. So
Not an application out of the blue.
scheduling seems like one of the most dangerous careers to have, and I think you did that for a long time, correct?
I did.
It just scares me because you get all the blame or you get the glory, but you get all the blame, I would think, if a show fails.
I guess I never thought of it that way, but in a sense, yeah, you're kind of the quarterback out there. You were you're kind of directing the offense, you're calling audibles, and and much like the quarterback, I think, yeah, you get too much praise if something works, and you probably get too much blame if it doesn't. TV's a massive team effort, and everybody's got to be pulling on the rope the right direction
Yeah.
at all times. Otherwise, shows tend to go by the wayside pretty quickly.
When we were young, I remember Seinfeld made a big move, I think, to Thursday nights. That was a
Yep.
powerhouse lineup going there. It just seems to me, though, that the complexity of what goes into that decision. Can you walk me through that a little bit? And do you find another show that you think, yeah, that's going to work well with that show? Or what's some of the thinking that goes into that?
I mean, it's a lot of people think it's, one or two things. It's 50 things.
Hmm.
It is where a show is in its life cycle. It's how much kind of internally you believe in the show.
Hmm.
Are all the creative execs and everybody enthusiastic? Does everybody think a show has potential for growth if you put it in a stronger spot?
Hmm.
Uh, in terms of kind of, marrying shows together. And I think this was something we were always pretty good at. We helped new shows by putting them behind existing hits.
Yeah.
Um, and that would give them at least a chance. Didn't always work. And if, the best way to, I had a friend by the name of Preston Beckman who was doing scheduling long before I was, and he used to say, the best way to kill a bad show is put it behind a good show, and that was true.
Yeah.
Um, but if there's even to this day, it's interesting, even with all the competition out there and all the different sources of content and streaming, and still the best way to get people to a new show is put it in proximity of a show that attracts a lot of people. And, with some skill and some luck, you'll get most of them to stick around and at least try the new show. And if they like it, most of them will come back.
There's so many film classics that didn't start out gangbusters at the box office. I think It's a Wonderful Life, Struggle, Christmas Story. A lot of these had some tough openings. And do you find a couple that have gotten away from you where you cut them and then they showed up somewhere else as a hit?
Um, I don't think there's too much of that. It is something you're seeing now with streaming, though. I mean, there's shows, take something like Suits that,
Mhm.
was an okay show on USA Network, and then the repeats pop up on Netflix, and all of a sudden, boom.
Right.
Netflix has kind of a unique place in the marketplace right now where it just has kind of market dominance, and
Yeah.
anything they put on that homepage carousel
Yep.
will automatically get millions and millions of people. That they have that kind of market power. Uh, but I don't, I do remember, we had plenty of shows that nobody thought much of when we, initially announced them that, became big hits. And I think that's, one kind of axiom of television is nobody really knows where the hits come from.
Yeah.
Most are happy accidents.
Yeah.
Seinfeld's first summer run, nobody watched. It was like 6 episodes, and nobody gave a damn about it.
So some of it is luck, some of it is timing. Even a good show can go by the wayside, as you say, if it doesn't catch. if it doesn't get the right wave, so to
It
speak.
can, but it's also, it's luck, and it's also, I think, skill of the team.
Hmm.
Um, I used to compare scheduling to kind of being like an offensive coordinator on a
Hmm.
football team.
Hmm.
You got your position coaches, and your job is to put it all together and execute the offense.
Yeah, and sometimes you're
Um,
going to get
so
sacked.
yeah, you're going to get sacked sometimes, but you got to have you got to have smart, creative people who recognized a good show and then can keep the show, on the rails. Some shows will start well, and then,
Yeah,
the producers will want to kind of, steer it off the tracks, and you got to keep it on the tracks. You got to have promotion people who know how to kind of tell the public about a show and make it look appealing.
yeah,
uh, you know, Publicity people who are out there, trying to get people to write about it, or do a web posting about it. Social people now. It really does take a team.
yeah. It's so complex now. I mean, I grew up with three networks, 4 channels. And with when you look at something like Netflix and all the cable, how much of a hurt has it put on network television? I mean, dramatic.
Yeah, very. I mean, the three networks have gone from essentially, yeah, a 90% market share to now, 10, 12%.
Yeah. Wow.
Um, still a big chunk of audience, and a show like Tracker can
Hmm.
still get 8 million people live, and probably double that with
Hmm.
delayed viewing, and when it shows later on streaming. But yeah, I mean, other than sports, which has held up really well,
Yeah.
uh, there's just, it used to be maybe 90 shows a year would kind of be introduced not too
Right.
long ago, and now hundreds of shows.
Yeah. Right. It's
Five, six
difficult to
hundred,
wade through it all. I mean, it's
yeah,
almost
five, six
astounding.
hundred, yeah, 500, 600 scripted shows, and then on top of that, a gajillion reality shows.
Ironic. I don't know if it's ironic, but I'm old enough, obviously, to have seen ER in its original run. But my wife and I
Yeah,
binged it last summer. And it's interesting to me how I thought that show was way ahead of its time and holds up today. And I mean, there were 20 episodes a season or something like that. It wasn't just 10 or 5, and those people busted
right.
their tail. And for that to keep my attention for that long, that's a masterpiece. The casting involved in something like that. And now Noah Wiley spun off, not directly, but into something called The Pit. And we wanted to
Yeah.
see that for a long time. We've seen like 5 episodes of it. But my thinking on the casting, a friend of mine makes films and said, 95% of it is casting, your success. And that show had amazing casting. There were numerous stars as kids that went on after that. And, I'm just amazed by the casting agents, and I don't think they get nearly the amount of credit they should. Do
No,
you?
I don't think they get the credit they deserve. And I don't think it's just casting, but at
Mhm.
the same point, if the casting can live up to the level, and the casting and the acting can live up to the level of good writing, then
Yeah.
there's an alchemy that takes place.
Right.
I was actually at Warner Brothers Television when ER came out,
Wow.
and when it was first shown to the head of NBC, that gentleman hated it,
Yeah.
detested it because it looked so different
Yep.
from the pacing was so breakneck. It was so different from kind of the pacing of most dramas at that time.
Absolutely. It was not Marcus Welby.
Right. So they were not kind of prepared. And then, I was in charge of testing at that time, and we tested the show, and I think to this day it's the highest testing pilot anybody's ever
Really?
seen in television.
Oh,
Every character resonated, and the pace of it just never let you.
no.
You never got you kind of never. It was a 2 hour pilot, and you kind of never breathed the entire time.
No, and like I said a minute ago, it held up. So that means if it held up at that time, it was rough. Like I read Catcher in the Rye last year for the first time, And I was like, that book is amazing. I mean, when you talk about classics, everyone wants to have read one, but nobody wants to, nobody really reads it. And then, but Catcher in the Rye, I just want to catch up on some, iconic books. And I think that was amazing for the 50s.
Yeah.
It's some of those things that you really have to, you don't know what's going to hold up. Did you greenlight Sheldon? Was that
Yes.
I want to ask, in your opinion, I'm 63, and why did I watch it? And I enjoyed it. And I'm very, very tough. I like dark stuff, but something about that show kept me interested. It's an intangible. What did you like about it?
I mean, I'll start by giving some credit to Chuck Lorre, who's
Mhm.
just, you know, and
Who's done a ton of stuff, right?
yeah, I mean, he's an absolute genius in the sitcom form.
Yeah.
This was interesting because it went from uh, Big Bang was
Right.
a multi-camera live audience show, and this was a tape show, so it was a bit of a departure. Um, but I think you mentioned characters. The casting and the characters
Mhm.
were just spot on. The
Yeah.
writing was spot on, and I think also it wasn't a show about a little kid. It was really a show
No.
about a family.
No.
And there were touch points for anybody who was watching. You could relate to somebody in that family. I think the best shows, and this is kind of a universal thing, anybody who watches can find some kind of touch point with a character. It doesn't have to be the lead character; it could be a supporting character, but
Mhm.
there's somebody in that cast who speaks to you,
Yeah.
uh, and you really like them, and you're like, I know where this person's coming from. Uh,
Identify with them.
yeah, I think that's always the key to me.
How's the George and Mandy holding up? First marriage.
It seems to be holding up really, really well. I think it's the number one comedy right now.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
The good Sheldon's a good segue with Craig T. Nelson into some movies. He did Green and Gold up here, and I think he adds a lot of credibility to that film, and he's been around forever. How did you and Sean Hanish link up?
We met at in Madison in school.
I didn't know he went to Madison. I know you
Yeah,
did.
we both went to Madison. He was pals with some roommates of mine.
Hmm.
A bunch of guys and I got a dumpy house,
Mhm.
and Sean happened to be one of their friends, and he was over all the time. And then he and I both moved out to Los Angeles at the exact same time to attend the University of Southern California. He went to film school. I went to the Annenberg School, and I slept on his floor the first couple nights I was
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
And then about 2 years ago, I was on that 23andMe, site, and I I was actually surprised to find out that we are cousins.
No, I didn't know that. Oh my.
Yeah, which just I mean he was already he's godfather to one of my sons, and I mean we're already tight as could be, and then we find out we're third or fourth cousins or
I think
something like
that's a TV show there, Kelly. I think they should
that.
develop
Could be.
that.
Could be, but we've just, gotten an enormous amount of laughs out of that.
Do you ever see things, and my friend and I always say, "Oh, that's an idea we'll never do." But you're in a position, I don't know. I mean, you were in a position to
Used
make,
to be.
yeah, I mean, did you ever come across an idea and go, "Damn, that would make a good show"? Are you more creative or more business oriented?
It's interesting. I would certainly say more business oriented.
Hmm.
If my background is research,
Hmm.
and typically the creatives are like and scheduling also. Research is definitely more. I don't want to say business, but more numbers based
Yeah.
and fact based. Creative is very touchy feely.
Hmm.
When I started going into scheduling, it actually married the two a little bit
Yeah.
because you can't have your head so far up your rear end on numbers that
Hmm.
you forego what might be a gem of a creative project that just needs some polishing. Um, some shows don't test well,
Right.
and easy enough to say, all right, well, this one's toast, but you've got to be willing. Again, Seinfeld, great example, tested like crap. Um, but you've got to be willing, if the creative people are like, I swear this is a great
Yeah.
show, you got to be willing to maybe see that, or at least give it that opportunity and that chance.
Right. The executive has to see something or believe somebody to make
Yeah, and
it.
then
Norman Lear, yeah.
when I transitioned to the president of entertainment role, then it's even more creative.
Yeah.
You're sitting in casting sessions, you're reading scripts, you're uh, doing all those things, and so that's, I don't want to say purely creative because you still have some business aspects you have to be concerned with. Uh, but there's where it's like your gut is what matters most.
Yeah, and gut is important. Some producers in film are not highly creative and they're making business decisions. I wrote a book on the making of Bull Durham, and there are scenes that tested through the roof that they had initially wanted to cut.
Hmm.
It just shows me and shows you and shows that it really is a roll of the dice sometimes. I mean, they wanted to cut the scene on the mound, which was, probably the most famous scene in the.
Well, it's the one I go to. Yeah, right
Yeah.
away.
And then even the bathtub scene, they didn't want to shoot it, but it wasn't the greatest scene. But I think that, it does show there's two different kinds of producers in my estimation. Were you on just a bit outside, were you the money guy, or did you get the producer as in hands-on, talk to Sean about what you wanted out of it?
I'd say we were true partners on it. I mean, Sean was
Mhm.
the director, and and I yield to him on pretty much any
Mhm.
creative decision. But I think, and I had produced or executive produced some of his other films where I was definitely more hands off.
Mhm.
But I definitely had more of a creative role on this one. The idea for it started with, literally with me and Gorman Thomas out on a golf course.
No kidding. I
And
knew Gorman fairly well. I don't know if Sean told you, but he bought my book,
uh-huh.
County Stadium, and there were a lot of people who chimed in on that. And Gorman was a piece of work, man.
Uh the genesis of this project. So he was, I was when I'm a young guy growing up
Hmm.
in my hometown was Burlington outside Milwaukee.
Hmm. I know.
And Gorman was my guy.
Yeah.
I wore my stirrups like him, my stance. I was playing little league, high school baseball.
Paul
My
Gorman.
stance was exactly like his. I took big cuts, and
Mhm.
home run or strikeout. I was all about it.
Yep.
And I know that's why the people of
Yeah.
Milwaukee
He
loved him so
swung
much.
for the fences and he'd run to
Yeah,
the wall. I was talking to Don Beebe yesterday, and you remember him from the Bills and the
of
Packers.
course.
They're making a movie out of his book, believe it or not. And he was, so humble. And we had such a wonderful conversation. It stuck to, how he develops his kids and his college coaching career, how he wants to make good men out of them. And he said he didn't, he wasn't seeking glory with this movie. He didn't seek it out. Somebody came to him and he said, well, if I have final say on script, because I don't want this to be some kind of self-aggrandizing thing.
Sure.
And I was like, wow, that's really something. But you and I both know how a producer or director of a film can, distort or change what you have. But I hope in the end he had the right legal, representation to make sure
Yeah.
that it won't change anything. So,
Well, I mean, even our film started as, I golfed with Gorman several times, and what we heard was, yeah, quite frankly, every hole, well, there was a new drinking story. 2 a.m. in Cleveland, you know, Saturday afternoon in Boston,
yeah.
you name it. And after hearing God knows how many of these, I thought there was something really interesting about this gang of guys who went out most every night and then hit a
Yeah.
bunch of home runs the next day.
There
Um,
is.
the turning point, and from what I've observed and heard, most really good documentaries at some point take a turn. that kind of that nobody sees coming. And one of our first interviews was, Robin Yount,
Yeah.
and we were just, struck, and he was great all the way through. And then we get to game seven and the finality that they are not going to win.
Right.
And um, it still, deeply affected him.
Yeah.
It affects him 40 years later. He talks about it's the one thing he didn't get in his career,
Mhm.
and that became a common theme as we talked to all these guys. There's a hole there that the thing you work for is playing t-ball, little league, high school ball, maybe college, or you work to get to that moment, and they were right there, and they didn't get it done, and it just and they all nobody blames anybody.
Mhm.
They all take kind of individual responsibility, saying, I should have done more. I should have gotten that hit.
Mhm.
Pete Vukovich, who had a torn rotator cuff and was out there pitching, but still blames himself.
Mhm.
That he's like, I didn't get the job done.
Yeah.
And he had a lead going into the sixth inning. It's ridiculous. Um, but all these guys are like, there was a place along the way I could have done something, and I didn't get it done.
I've been talking a lot to the old guard, like Phil Garner, Tom Trebelhorn. I've had them on a lot, and we're pairing them up. I don't know if you remember the Easter Sunday game.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, I'm having a live stream on the 18th of April, and I've got Trebelhorn, Surhoff, Swaim, and Plesac. And we're going to do a live stream about that experience. And the thing I've learned about this most, Kelly, is that as a fly on the wall, bringing Garner and Sack to talk about something that they never had talked about before, I feel it's a magical experience to be the fly on the wall. But I really appreciate being the conduit, where all that comes together. And for me, it's very gratifying. And in a lot of ways, that's what you did. You brought memories together, I think.
Yeah, I mean, what was really interesting, I just did another interview, and somebody was asking me about baseball series. There's been a few baseball series on television, and why I didn't think they worked. And I thought it was because you never felt like you were getting the full story. You felt like you were getting a very sanitized version of what a
Mhm.
clubhouse was like. And uh, the privilege Sean and I had was all these players spoke really openly with us
Mhm.
about some of these crazy stories,
Yep.
uh, about how they honestly felt, and um, not to put too fine a point on it, but being out on the golf course with Gorman, after a couple holes, it's like he's giving you shit, you're giving him
Yep.
shit,
Right.
and look, I was not in the clubhouse with the '82 Brewers, but maybe you get a 1% feeling of what it was actually like
Right.
after hearing all these stories from all these guys.
Right.
And you get a little you get a peek inside, and it's a real peek inside, which was thrilling for us.
Well, he's from Charleston, as you know, and my sister's been down there 20 years. And he told us of a restaurant that they hadn't known of in South Carolina. They lived there, and and we found it. It didn't even have a sign, but that's the neat thing when you find something from somebody like that. And he also told me that Mike Caldwell carried a briefcase, and the only thing in it was ketchup.
Right.
What a character! I
Yeah,
mean,
amazing.
the friend I was referring to talked about documentaries. Have you seen American Movie?
Yes.
Okay, it's Mark Borchardt and I are kind of pals, email pals, and I really thought that was an amazing slice. Now, he embodied what my friend says. You have to have that one central character for a through line to the film. And John Adam is a very good friend of mine, and he was your through line. I haven't seen it yet, I'm sorry, but I'm waiting for Roku, I'm so poor. John Adam, like when somebody said, why John Adam? And Robin, turned you on to him. And he has that, Johnny has that amazing sense of a lot of things. Did you find him rewarding in your
Oh,
film?
he was what he helped put the pieces together. He helped. One, he kind of was stood in for Don Sutton a little bit because they were very close.
Mhm.
So he was able to give us, obviously, sadly, we're not in time to talk to Don Sutton for this. So he gave us a little of that, but he also really helped with the exposition of the storytelling. He could fill in holes along the
Yeah.
way.
He's a
And he
great
was,
storyteller. I thought
yeah,
he
and he was
was a great
excellent
radio.
for that. And he could talk about, the mood of the entire
Right.
clubhouse after this win or this loss, which
Right.
was again, um, Sean and I really wanted to, after a couple interviews, we said, God, wouldn't it be neat if we could do this without a narrator? Wouldn't it be neat if we could let the guys really just tell the story in their own words?
Hmm.
And in the first cut we saw of the movie, it was like, oh my God, we they do. It
Pulled it
works.
off. He pulled
It
it off.
it works. But John really helped, I guess, stitch some ragged ends together in the storytelling, which was immensely helpful.
Yeah, he is. He has these ability. He'd be a great radio guy because he knows when to pause, and he uses that pause very effectively. He's one of my favorite people, and he tells me things that he won't share publicly, and you know what I
Yeah.
mean, just stories
Well,
that
he told us a few things too. Yeah.
off the record.
Um, he didn't, but there were a couple things we just chose not to use. There's
Yeah,
there's there's
right.
so much that we have that um I mean, we cut this thing down to 2 hours,
Yeah.
and I mean, we have 50, I think we have 40 hours of one-on-one
Could there
interview.
be? Can you get something else out of it? Do you think, or isn't that worth the
Oh
effort?
yeah, if we hope to maybe go back someday and the old DVD extras,
Yeah.
just because um, some of the interviews, I don't want to say went a little sideways, but just there were some tangents, and Pete Vukovich talking about pitching and pitching today versus pitching in the 80s. And the way he talks about, he didn't care if he got a strikeout or not. He talked about my job as a pitcher is get the batter to put a bad swing on the ball
Hmm.
and not be able to put the force of the bat on the ball.
I've never heard that particular put it that way. I think that's
Yeah, and that the difference today about the art of putting a pitch 3 inches off the plate versus today 6 inches off the plate.
yeah.
Uh, Nobody's swinging at a pitch 6 inches off the plate, but if you've got a guy with two strikes, 3 inches off the plate, he's probably got to take a swing at it, and he's
Yep.
probably not going to be able to put a good bat on
A
it. And
slider or something there will really.
yeah, and even if it's like he's like, yeah, if there was a guy in the lineup I didn't like the matchup, he's like, I'd walk him and get to the next guy who I knew I could get out.
That's the
Uh,
chess match my wife doesn't get.
yeah.
A lot of people don't. They think it's boring. I'm like, it's not boring.
And when you hopefully watch the film, you'll
I
see,
will. I will.
yeah, you'll see Ted Simmons talking about pitching with Vukovich when
Very
he,
smart man, Ted
oh,
is.
incredibly smart, but talking about Vukovich when he doesn't have a shoulder.
Mhm.
And how they were able to fool hitters. And we actually, it's one of my favorite sequences in the film. We actually show in the 82, it's game five of the ALCS,
Yeah.
how Vuk is getting guys out, without really a fastball.
Yeah.
And we kind of we have almost a demonstration of how he's doing it with Ted narrating, and it's fascinating.
Yeah. I'm so looking forward to it. I asked Sean about the DVD release because I didn't make it to the theater, but it's fun because I wrote for the Brewers for 30 years on their magazines. Let me ask you, what's next? What's on the horizon for you?
Um, there's a TV project I'm working on that I hope to that I would be a producer on. That we're hoping the this the a network bought the script, and now we're hoping we'll go to pilot. And if we can get to pilot, I'm confident we'll get it on the air. But
Um,
it's a tough environment these days. So
well, these days, even people with connect, I mean, you're high, but I mean, even people who've done projects, successful projects. I was talking to David Zucker. We're kind of pals too. So I did write a book with him, and he's from Shorewood, as you know. And he says he can't get anything off the ground right now. Nobody's willing to part with the dough. And it's amazing. Airplane Naked Gun made $1 trillion, but
right.
Nobody's, people are tight with the purse strings. Before I let
Yeah.
you go, I've got this amazingly family-friendly questionnaire, and there's choice between two things, and it's family-friendly. And the neat thing is, I get to decide whether you're right or wrong. So,
Okay,
here you go. All
let's
right.
go.
Pale ale or Miller Lite?
Oof, wow. I'm gonna go Miller Lite most of the time.
As I get older, I get so filled. I can't even drink anymore. I'm not going there anymore. Young Sheldon or the Equalizer?
Which equalizer?
I don't know. Pick one.
Okay. I'll go Young Sheldon. It was a pretty brilliant, well executed show.
I really enjoy it. I'm telling you right now, it takes something to keep me, because I was going to say earlier that once you're on to streaming, and it's hard to go back to network television because, number one, they don't swear and everybody swears. And yeah, even this new show, The Pit, it's pretty,
Yeah,
it's laden with, as you know, laden with reality. And I think you can't be in a environment like that without saying, things like that. All right, Laverne or Shirley?
I'm gonna go Laverne. Laverne was
Really?
La- Laverne made me laugh, and Penny Marshall was also on The Odd Couple, which is one of my favorite shows. So
The Odd Couple. I got a chance to interview her when the Happy Days crowd came to Milwaukee, and she hadn't been to Milwaukee before, so I think that was her only time there. But League of Their Own was amazing. I was gonna say this one, but I know you won't answer it, so I'm gonna move on. Special sauce at the County Stadium or the ketchup?
say that one more time.
Special sauce at County Stadium.
Special
Yeah.
sauce all day long.
All right. Surfing or deep sea fishing?
Um,
I've never surfed. I've never deep. Well, no, I did go deep sea fishing once.
I know deep sea fishing doesn't go well for me, so I'll go surfing.
I went once in Florida, and I spent the entire time face down in the below deck on some steel surface to prevent getting sick.
That's where I would be too.
I'm a real wuss. All right, now this one is for all the marbles, Kelly. Lucille Ball or Betty White?
Ooh, I'm gonna go Lucy, and I'm gonna go Lucy because of the historic nature of what she did, not just the show,
You're the
but
studio owner.
she
Her,
owned the studio. She basically invented the three camera sitcom with the live audience. They did not do shows that way. And then they were smart enough also to shoot it on film.
hmm,
So when you watch it today, it's
hold it up.
it's still pristine because they shot it on, 35 millimeter film, and it's still gorgeous. So in addition to being a gifted comedian, uh, kind of inventing the modern sitcom. I gotta give her credit for that.
But I do have to tell you that's incorrect. Betty White was the right answer. So I'm really sorry about that. Did was
I and nothing but respect for her.
the Honeymooners one camera? I don't know. I don't know enough about that, but that was a brilliant show. But did they?
It's one of my top five shows.
Yeah,
I define like my favorite sitcoms are where you know the characters so well that you can get a laugh without even a line. Just a character just looks at maybe another character and you know exactly what they're thinking without them having to say a word.
I think
Uh,
Gleason and Carney had that. Their
yeah,
characters
the
were
Honeymooners
so
had it. Uh, what did we just say? The Odd Couple had it. You knew what Felix was thinking. You knew what Oscar was thinking.
yeah.
It's brilliant.
It's funny. I watched.
WKRP, Everybody Loves Raymond. These
Yeah,
are just shows where you feel like you know the characters,
right.
and all they have to do is look and you laugh.
Right. I watched The Odd Couple, but the movie to me, The Odd Couple, was just Jack. I'll say Jack Lemmon was one of the finest actors we've ever had because I don't know anybody, Glengarry Glen Ross, and then, he did, whatever he did, Grumpier Old Men. And I think that kind of ability. Now, it's really hard to say your favorite television show. I'm not going to ask you our favorite series, but mine is Better Call Saul.
Okay.
And I like Breaking Bad, but I loved Better Call Saul. And I love The Sopranos, I love The Wire, I love Boardwalk Empire. But to me, and I guess I don't really know why, but I was talking to Robert Hayes from Airplane a few days ago, and he's good friends with Jonathan Banks, but he hasn't seen Saul yet. And the one thing I did say was Jonathan in the series spent 15 minutes. I don't know if you saw it, but trying to figure something out, not one word of dialogue. And where else are you going to get that, Kelly?
Yeah.
That's to me, that's the magic when you can create something on cable now, streaming that you couldn't do in network television. 15 minutes, that's quarter of the show. But that to me is the subtle nuance, and I find that remarkable. And so that's my reason.
I,
So
I
thank you for taking the questionnaire. You didn't get 100%, but I think 90, yeah,
I'll
90%.
I'll try to do better next time.
We will give you another chance, but study a little bit harder on your
I
opinions.
will. I will.
Continued success with the film. I'm so looking for it. And don't be mad at me for not seeing it. Sean didn't invite me to the premiere, so
Well, we're out on Roku on April 11th.
I'm there.
Roku and the Roku channels. Anybody can see it. You can see it for free.
Yeah.
If you have a Roku system on your TV, it'll be right there. Otherwise, if you sign up for Roku channel, again, it's absolutely free. You can watch it, and we are kind of excited to share it with the world.
I would be. Congratulations on that deal. That doesn't happen that often, I don't think.
Yeah, we're it's the other thing. It's in this environment. They promised us they would promote it,
Well,
uh, which is exciting and important these days because as we talked about earlier, there are so many projects out there, and even if like Netflix buys your project, if they don't bother to promote it, nobody knows it's there.
well, it's funny you should say that because one of the best movies I've ever seen or shows was Adolescence, and it's brand new. And it was the first thing on top left of their selections. And had it not been there,
Right.
I don't know if I ever would have found it. And I even went in skeptically. I'm not, what is this? But if you haven't seen it yet, it is the most dynamic of its ilk, It was all one camera for 4 episodes, each one. Probably it is the finest thing I've ever seen in that ilk, and maybe one of the best series I've ever seen. So please see that.
I
And
look
I'll
forward
send
to it.
you an email for our live streaming and see if you want to tune in for that.
Sounds great. I would love to. All
Kelly, thanks so much. I hope we talk again.
right, Jim, that sounds great. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you, sir. Bye bye.